I am a 22-year-old law student. I am a survivor of sexual assault and am studying law as I hope to build a career helping victims of sexual violence receive justice. In the last few weeks, the government has alienated many women like myself. So my question is for Kim Rubenstein. The Prime Minister has dismissed the possibility of an independent inquiry into the historical rape allegation against Christian Porter, saying it would be inconsistent with the rule of law. Most sexual assaults go unreported. Only 1 in 10 of those reported lead to a conviction. Is it fair to dismiss an inquiry when the rule of law fails victims of assault and rarely brings perpetrators to justice?
Well, thank you, Chloe, for asking the question and sharing your experience. I hope you will be joining thousands upon thousands of people on Monday the 15th of March for the Women's March for Justice around the country to raise these really significant issues to ensure that our leaders really listen to the voices of women throughout the country and men who are supporting equality broadly. But significantly on the importance of an independent inquiry, I am very clear that it is fundamental to our system of representative democracy that a minister who has been subject to serious allegations be stood aside while there is some assessment as to his being fit and proper for the role as a minister. This is quite separate to the criminal responsibility. You will have learnt in your constitutional law classes, I hope, that we have a system where we have a legislature, an executive and the judiciary. Each of those institutions are key for safeguarding the rule of law. And the rule of law is not just a question of the laws that govern us, because any country, Nazi Germany had a rule of law, but a rule of law in a democracy is about accountability between elections, but it's also about keeping the executive accountable in between elections. And every member of parliament is accountable to their own constituency. And so each voter, each active citizen will decide whether they want Christian Porter to be back as their representative. But that's a separate question to whether he should be in the highest legal role in the country as Attorney General.
I just want to push you on this a little bit, and I want to make clear it's a single allegation, not multiple.
Yes.
What sort of inquiry do you think would be appropriate?
Yes. So within our parliamentary framework and within the notion of the executive, there is a capacity to have an inquiry in relation to the testing out of some of those allegations, in relation to whether there is a sufficient amount of material that would raise questions as to whether he should continue in the most senior legal role in the land. He is responsible for law reform. He is responsible for initiating and representing the government in any legal matter, domestically and internationally. So that person, as Attorney General, it's actually not about Christian Porter, about the role of Attorney General has to be beyond repute. And there are many instances where ministers have been stood down for a range of different reasons. But the answer to your what type of inquiry, someone who is a senior investigator or eminent former judge, in confidence, would be able to call out to the community to bring information that may not have come out yet because, as we know, the attorney himself had not even looked at those allegations. I mean, there are serious questions of judgment here as to the Prime Minister and the attorney not even briefing themselves properly to respond and to be aware of the allegations in full. So there are various questions that really respond.
Well, firstly, to Chloe, thank you for bringing forward this question and for your bravery in doing so. It is a very important question. And I think the first thing I would say, and it goes to your point about access to justice for victims of sexual assault, that historically and even today, we haven't always done anywhere near as well as we should by victims. And I think we should acknowledge that as a nation. I think there has been a bit of a reckoning in recent years, and there's been efforts whether it's by the police, whether it's by legislatures to try and grapple with these issues to improve how victims of sexual assault are treated, how they can have their day in court and how they can seek justice. And I think that is an ongoing project that we as a nation need to continue to work on. When it comes to questions that Kim has touched on around I guess, a different process separate from the criminal justice system for the Attorney-General in this case. The concerns that the government has, the concerns that I would have, is that in setting up such a parallel process in these circumstances, and in these circumstances, and Arthur Moses, the former head of the Law Council, put a very strong view recently in terms of the challenges with this kind of alternate process when we have a historical claim, we have no sworn victim statement, we have no witnesses, and we have no physical evidence. In those circumstances, the question, and I don't think Kim has answered this question, I don't think the Labor Party and also calling for this type of inquiry have answered, is what is the question that such an inquiry would be asking when the police have examined it and come to those conclusions? What would be the burden of proof? With whom would it rest? What would be the standard of proof in those circumstances? And so when Arthur Moses says it would create a shifting sands approach, that would be my concern. I absolutely accept your concerns about victims of sexual assault getting justice through our court system, and I think there is a long way to go. But I would argue that we shouldn't look to address that serious injustice that is still with us by potentially creating another serious injustice. And that's what we're grappling with, and that's one of the reasons I wouldn't support such an inquiry.
So I think the distinction is that the standard of proof is about ministerial responsibility. Now, the former Prime Minister, John Howard, set up in his first year as Prime Minister new ethical standards that would be governing ministers to recognise that ministerial responsibility is significant for the trust, the consent between the people who are in power and those they are governing.
But this allegation predates Christian Porter's time in politics by some 3 decades.
But it does speak to his standing to maintain the trust of the people in his role as Attorney-General, as the head law officer.
Fiona Simson?
Do you know what worries me, Hamish, I think, and Chloe, thank you very much for standing up and thank you very much for your story and for asking the question. And I also wanted to acknowledge Brittany Higgins, Grace Tame, Kate, who we've been talking about now for weeks. More than a week. It does worry me that we're focusing, I think we've spent the last week discussing all these ins and outs of the Constitution and can we and can't we and should we and shouldn't we. And we can have a really good discussion here on the panel about should we, shouldn't we. I haven't seen the allegations. I don't know the Constitution. Kim has, she does. But isn't it about, Zed just said then, we need to actually, fix and acknowledge as a country that the legal system is failing people who have had sexual violence or sexual assault. We know that that's hundreds of thousands of women.
Sure, but when politicians do talk about that, people, including the Prime Minister, say we've got to start believing victims. Now, in this instance, the Prime Minister didn't read the document containing the allegations and then declared that there was no case for further interrogation.
Well, but Hamish, we have to get to the nub of the problem. The problem is here that we have a parliament that is not an exemplar workplace. It should be, I absolutely agree that we hold the politicians to the highest standards in the land, and I think that we should. And the workplace should be one of the exemplar workplaces in Australia. I sit on other boards across Australia, and it is not an exemplar workplace. Why is it not? Why are we not fixing some of the issues that Zed was talking about then in our legal system, whereby only that 1 in 10 complaints, 1 in 10 people who go to the police with their allegations of sexual assault actually have any legal recourse at all. And I think when we look back, there was an inquiry in 2020 that the Human Rights Commission put in place, 55 recommendations. Where are those 55 recommendations? What about the Sexual Discrimination Act that excludes parliamentarians and judges from sexual harassment when they're actually acting in the course of their work? Those sorts of things that we should be nubbing out on and looking at, rather than actually having this political, because when you read about it at the moment in the papers, you can't get any commentary that's not political. We need to get rid of the politics. I think we need to get on to the real issues that Chloe has talked about and others have talked about, and we need to start actually helping and making change in a space where at the moment we really need to make that change.
Okay. If this part of the conversation raises any issues for you, you can contact 1800 RESPECT or Lifeline. Their numbers are on your screen right now.